All right. So thanks, Crystal, for jumping on this. I think it's going to be super valuable for a lot of people. As you know, there's sort of misinformation or bad information out there around nutrition. Just kind of provide some clarity for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Like as you know, I kind of did some of the lifestyle coaching stuff in the past, and I know that's kind of where you started before becoming an RDN. I know I've heard plenty of crazy things before. I'm sure you still do, right? So,
There's a lot out there, especially on social media for sure.
yeah, yeah. Social media I've seen some, God, there was one the other day. Oh, it was about water. Yeah, yeah. I man, if I should have saved it. I should like send you and tag you in it. But it was basically talking about how like water's a scam. And I was like, this has got to be rage bait.
Oh,
Has
I
to be.
saw that.
Did you?
I
Yeah.
saw that. I think I reposted it because I was like,
Maybe
this is
that's
too
where I saw it.
much.
Maybe it was
It
you.
might
I
be.
was
Yeah,
like,
it might be.
I was like, this is. I mean, this is it. This is like we've reached the pinnacle of idiocy now, right? So, like,
Yeah,
anyway, all kind of crazy stuff out there. So hopefully, this can provide some clarity for people.
sure. Yeah.
So, I guess just jumping kind of just right into it. What's the biggest nutrition myth that you hear all the time?
I mean, there's a lot. The one that really came to mind when I first saw this question was the idea of like carbs and sugar, like inherently, make you gain weight, make you fat, make you overweight. It's sort of like just like everything right on social media, it's like one of those extremes that people like to go to. It really has to do more with calories and consuming in excess, not just like one specific nutrient like carbs. I think carbs get a really bad reputation because they have an effect on our insulin and whatever, which is a normal process. But it really just comes down to, are we eating more calories than we need, which many people are, and so that can result in weight gain, or are we eating too little calories, which can result in weight loss, which isn't always a good thing. Like some people don't need to lose weight. And so really it comes down to like that energy balance. Of course, that's not the whole story, but in, relation to like carbs and sugar make you fat, it really isn't that simple, and it really doesn't have to do with just carbs and sugar,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of glad you brought up the whole like energy balance thing, right? Because I have had people in the past and still even still now talk about like you hear a lot about like, oh, it's a hormone thing or this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, it's manipulating or affecting the same equation, right? Like even though there's
Hmm.
other factors that go into it, it all sort of leads to that end result
To
of
the same thing, at least
calorie.
according to the research right now. I mean,
Right.
like that's what the data shows. There's a lot of factors that influence how much we eat, though, and we'll probably get into this in a later question, I think. But, it really does come down to that. But there's other factors at play that kind of influence how much we actually eat. So
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Awesome. So I guess kind of moving on from that, like, is it food quality, food quantity? What's the most important?
Yeah. And so leading into what we were just talking about, or kind of like leading into this, I should say both. Both is really important because food quality can definitely directly impact how much we're eating. The quality of the food or the nutrients that are contained in our food can impact our behaviors. Our hunger, satiety hormones are signaling, things like that. So, like I said before, like calories are really helpful in supporting the weight gain, weight loss, or weight maintenance, even, right? Weight maintenance is really what we want to be most of the time. We don't want to live in a deficit. We don't want to live in a surplus. But the quality of our nutrition really helps keep us nourished, satiated, and properly fueled. So just to kind of like do an overview, right, of the macros. We talk about macros a lot in the fitness world, and it's like protein helps with muscle growth, maintenance. I mean, where our body is made up of protein, there are many activities that proteins do in our body, like help carry nutrients from one place to another. Protein also helps support our hair, skin, and nails. That's kind of what we know protein as. Then we've got carbs, where it's the glucose, energy, like blood sugar situation, but it also helps provide things like fiber and micronutrients, from things like plant sources. So it's not just about the glucose. And then dietary fats, it's like, I feel like they kind of like fall between the cracks a little bit because we're so focused on carbs, we're so focused on protein, but dietary fats help us absorb specific nutrients, like fat soluble nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. It helps us create hormones like estrogen and testosterone. So you want to talk about something that can impact hormonal, imbalances, if we're not eating enough fat, that can certainly happen. That's just like kind of one piece of the puzzle. And then when we talk about like nutrient quality, things like ultra processed foods can be really helpful in convenience circumstances and maybe if we need some quick energy. But if that's what the majority of our diet is, are we getting the nutrients we need? Are we satisfied? And as a result, are we overeating because we're not getting what we need?
Yeah.
And so that can be an important consideration too. Like, what is the foundation of our diet?
I like that too because something I used to when I was doing like lifestyle coaching or even now just working with clients or talking to members in the gym and stuff. It doesn't mean you can't ever like you can be dysfunctional the other way, right? Like oh you can never
Yeah,
like a piece of cake or something. But
right.
when you're kind of approaching this, I feel like a good thing. Let me know if you agree. Is like what can I add into my diet rather than what can I take out? Kind of
Yeah,
inherently pushes that ultra processed food to this side. Doesn't mean you can't ever have it,
exactly.
but I mean,
Exactly.
so yeah, all that. It's funny you said glucose too, and I'm going off script here a little bit. But
Yeah.
what is the continuous glucose monitors for non-diabetics? What's your take on that? That's been really popular. Glucose and insulin's like such a buzzword now, I feel like.
I think everyone, since we're living in, a society of having choice and if we can afford to do it, like, sure. What does it tell us though? Like, that's the thing. It's like, if anything, it could tell us that maybe we're over consuming. We don't really know outside of like diabetes management or, the diagnosis of diabetes, what these sort of like blood sugar spikes tell us. There's different research studies to show that while we're exercising, our blood glucose spikes. It's pretty normal. So it's like, what is it telling us? I mean, if you're like a data-driven person and you're like curious, sure, as long as it's not like creating like a disordered eating or like sort of anxiety-ridden like day-to-day thing. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other just because, I mean, I definitely think it's useful in the diabetic population, but it's like, what do we do with that information? It's like
Right.
the biggest
Like,
thing.
yeah, I feel like to my take on it is always like as if you're non-diabetic, right? It's like oh, you see an insulin spike after eating. It's like cool, your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to, right? Like
Right. And that's the thing too. It's like maybe in a lab or in like from a research scientific perspective, it can be useful when we're investigating like biological differences between how one person absorbs nutrients versus the other. Right.
yeah.
So there are some like differences in how much of a nutrient, like, carbs we actually absorb from one person to another. And so those are things that are being researched. But like for the general population, I don't know.
Yeah. I was yeah, totally off script, right? I just was curious.
No, I think it's a good question. It's being asked a lot, talked about a
Yeah.
lot.
You just because you just see a lot of it pop up, or I do at least. And like maybe I don't know what's that my algorithm like comes through my feed all the time.
Totally.
Awesome. So yeah, so we talked about kind of the different things, and so like protein is one of the things you brought up. Obviously, that everyone knows about protein, wants protein, and so that kind of leads me in asking about the carnivore diet, right? Is
Yeah.
there legitimacy to it, like its supposed health benefits, or is it just hype and fake news, right?
The carnivore diet. So I'm a big, I mean, as you've probably seen, if anyone has looked at my content already, big digestive health person. And so what does the carnivore diet mean? It means only eating like animal products,
Hmm.
focusing on protein. Inherently, it's going to be a higher fat diet, higher protein diet. But the things that we're missing are many of the micronutrients that we get from like plant foods and then also fiber. Not to say you don't get micronutrients from animal products, you absolutely do. But there are some major ones that miss the mark with carnivore. I think people that feel better on carnivore, depending upon what feel better means to them, right? It's like, for one, it's really difficult to overeat animal products. It's very filling. They're high in protein, high in fat, very slow digestion. If someone loses weight, it might just be because they're in a calorie deficit. I mean, that's really what it is. So if that's what feels better means, that's likely what's happening. And then the other piece of it is I've heard a lot of people say, oh, like I have less like GI discomfort, less bloating, less stomach pain. Sure, that might be nice in the short term, but let's think through like why that's happening. It's normal to be bloated and to have, gas and things like that, especially after we eat. That means we have a gut microbiome and they're doing their job and that your intestines are moving. The benefits of fiber, I think, far outweigh the benefits of not having gas and bloating. Some people will say, oh, their autoimmune stuff has like calmed down being on carnivore. Well, it's also like a risk benefit thing. Are you willing to be malnourished in some areas with some, nutrient deficiencies? How often are you having a bowel movement whenever you're a
Right.
carnivore? Like
Yeah.
these are things to like think about. I'm not a huge advocate for it because I think in general, the benefits people perceive that they are having don't last very long because new issues can arise when we're removing an entire food group.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And and I always try to tell people there's no like magic diet, right? It's like it's going to be different for everyone. And so I
Yeah.
guess in that vein, right? Like not say someone's hell bent like I'm going to do carnivore, I'm going to give it a shot or whatever. What are some like fibers, obviously one of them. What are some other like big key sort of micronutrients maybe that they need to be aware of that they may be missing
You need
out
to
on and
supplement.
supplement with? Yeah.
The one that stood out to me the most is vitamin C. If I remember, correctly, vitamin C primarily comes from plant foods.
Mhm.
And so, what is it, scurvy? Is that the
Yeah.
vitamin C
Yeah.
deficiency
Like
that happens over
sailors, like
time?
pirates and stuff back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the one thing that comes to mind, without like being too deep into it with specific nutrients.
Yeah.
But that's a big one. One thing about vitamin C, it's an antioxidant. So it kind of helps with that sort of managing free radicals that
Mhm.
can cause issues in the body. But also, it's been shown, through research that it actually helps us synthesize collagen. So the absence of that nutrient from even that perspective can be detrimental. It also helps us absorb iron. Like, for instance, if I have a patient that's like taking iron supplementation for whatever reason, sometimes you make the recommendation to drink it with like a vitamin, like maybe orange juice or something to
Okay.
enhance absorption. So there's so many little things that
And
can go wrong.
there's kind of an irony there too, right? So like you're missing out on the nutrient that's going to help you deal with all these things that you're getting from the carnivore diet, iron,
Yes,
magnesium,
yeah.
collagen, right? And it's
Mhm.
like it's all for nothing because you're deficient in vitamin C. I don't know. That it there's a little bit of a it's kind of funny
Yeah.
irony there, right?
And so that's like a long-term effect that can happen. You might not notice that like right away, but over time, if you're doing this for a long time, you might run into issues.
That's good.
So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think that's good to know. I think they need to be aware of that, right? Okay, so protein kind of leads me into like the next thing, right? So how much protein do you actually need to, gain muscle and then
Yeah.
and then maintain it? You always hear, and I think this is sort of ubiquitous across the fitness industry, at least right now, is like 1 gram per pound. Like, is that legit, you would say?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I've been told that too, and I wonder where that figure comes from, other than we as a society are so used to like pounds versus kilograms. But in the medical, like we've talked about this, like in
Hmm.
the medical field, we go by kilograms.
Yep.
And so when I calculate that kind of thing, what I recommend at minimum for just like a regular person that's not necessarily an athlete, that doesn't really have aspirations to build muscle, I mean, I would say a gram per kilogram,
Okay.
of body weight. So here I kind of typed out an example to kind of go by. So let's say
Mhm.
someone's 150 pounds. So I guess we can kind of think of this in terms of like weights, right? At CrossFit.
Yeah.
The conversion is 2.2. So we would do 150 divided by 2.2. That means this person's 68 kilograms. So we'll want a minimum of 68 grams of protein per day for this person, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's someone who's very active, who has higher needs, whether we're doing a calorie surplus or even maintenance, I typically start at like, because I want it to be attainable, right? Like 1.5 to 1.8 grams per kilogram, depending upon the individual. So for that, I think the figures that I put here was like 102 to 122 grams per day.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of levels out with the 1 gram, or what is it? Yeah, the 1 gram per pound of body weight. Yeah, it's like pretty close. That's just like, I guess, a little perspective of like when I calculate it, the process that I would go through. But in general, yeah, I mean, if you're wanting to build muscle, you got to have enough calories to kind of support that like growth. So sometimes you have to go in a surplus if you're trying to bulk, which is not comfortable for a lot of people
Yeah.
because you could gain some body fat in the process, but then also have the appropriate amount of protein. And then when you're trying to cut, you want to have the appropriate amount of protein too to support your muscle mass, make sure you're not losing it as you're losing body fat. So it is
Right.
an important element of the building and then protecting of muscle.
Yeah, because I mean, I would imagine like if we go into a calorie deficit to lose weight for whatever reason, like is it true that your body go after muscle first before fat, or like how does that work? Because I would almost think a protein, making sure you hit your protein goal is even more important during a cut than a bulk, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I want to say I use this term loosely. It's easier for the body to break down like proteins for energy. It's a process like we call gluconeogenesis, where you're creating glucose from something other than a carbohydrate source. So you're essentially creating energy from amino acids, and that's broken down by muscle.
Yeah.
So in a weight loss situation, it's important to be careful with the deficit. Make sure it's not too low for that and many other reasons. And then also prioritizing the protein so that we're minimizing the muscle breakdown. I think there's some that happens that's like somewhat normal along with the fat loss. But yes, you're correct. Maintaining that protein intake is going to have a protective effect for sure.
With that kind of and sort of in the same vein, and like now we're gonna kind of like talk about like some old school bro science, especially like when I was coming up in the fitness industry and stuff like that, right? And you still hear about it, but
Yeah.
the anabolic window, right? Is it a thing? Like if I don't get my protein in 30 minutes, is my workout all for nothing?
The drama, right?
Yeah,
Like that, I feel like that's what sells. They've done a lot of research on this, and I think ultimately what they have found is that it doesn't matter that much in terms of that like time period as a for an anabolic window, as long as you're meeting your calorie and your protein needs daily, it's not much to worry about. But what they did find is that if you're waiting too long, let's say you did like a morning CrossFit workout, right? And you did it fasted because you can't tolerate food before you work out. Totally reasonable, right?
yeah,
So it's technically fasted if you haven't consumed anything. In that situation, we want to make sure we get something in rather quickly, something that's got protein and carbs, because we want to make sure that we're not having muscle breakdown after that exercise. Kind of along the same lines of what we were just discussing with, breaking down muscle and the body's ability to do that to create energy. If we've gone a long period of time without eating and we want to make sure that we're keeping our glucose, stable and it doesn't drop too low, we can lose some muscle if we have an extended period of time with not eating even after exercise. So if anything, it's not really about the muscle growth, it's about making sure we minimize muscle loss.
makes
Does
sense.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And kind of like I think you and I've talked about this before, but it's sort of switching that body from catabolic state to an
exactly.
anabolic state, right? Not talking about anabolic window bro science stuff, but just that state of we're breaking down to now we're resting, building, and repairing.
Yes,
So
exactly. So it shifts into that like recovery sort of
yeah,
mindset.
yeah,
Absolutely.
awesome. So then still protein because protein is like such a big topic, right? In our community at Serve, we have like a lot of plant-based eaters.
Mhm.
You have kind of it's like with everything, you sort of have these extreme camps, but plant-based proteins, right? Can you still build and maintain muscle mass
Oh yeah.
as a vegan
Oh
or
yeah.
vegetarian? Like, and is there
Absolutely.
things to look at with plant-based protein? Is there more to consider with plant-based proteins versus animal protein?
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, the animal protein seems more straightforward because it is more mainstream, but it's definitely possible to maintain and build being vegan or vegetarian. Protein supplements can be really helpful with that if we're having a hard time sort of managing our calorie needs with our protein needs, right?
Yeah.
Because if we think about it, we have to shift our protein sources to things like nuts, seeds, legumes, like carb sources, maybe like things that have higher fat. And so they can contribute more calories per like serving. It takes some strategy and working with a professional or someone who knows how to help you sort of reach that protein profile that you need. And then, of course, soy and pea protein seem to be the two better supplement sources. There's other ones that have blends, right? But it's really about that amino acid profile and making sure we have all the essential amino acids. We have enough leucine because that's what is shown to stimulate muscle growth. Keeping all that in mind, it's absolutely possible. It just takes more strategy in some cases.
Okay, yeah. And I feel
Yeah.
like if someone is a plant-based eater already, they have
Yeah.
and be more strategic with their eating just anyway, right? It's just the world's set up for us people to eat meat.
Hmm.
Like again, sorry, I'm going off script because something popped in my head and I'm kind of like a BB in a shoebox sometimes.
You're
The soy, I kind of already know the answer to this, but I think it's important to talk about the soy thing, right? Like you hear, especially dudes, like the whole like phytoestrogens and all that, and like soy protein. Is there like am I going to get gynecomastia because I start drinking soy protein or something like that? Is my testosterone going to drop off because I have soy?
I think it's been debunked. I haven't dug into the literature on that in a long time, but I get the concern because it's like the molecule similar, yada yada. But
Yeah.
I don't. I'm pretty sure there was some research done that debunked that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to speak out of turn because I haven't looked at it lately. But based on what I know, it's not really something to worry about.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's
But if you're that
kind of
worried
what
about it,
I've heard.
do
Um,
pea protein. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, then there's pea protein. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. And then and like you said, blends of kind of everything, right? So the collagen, and we kind of talked about this a little bit ago with the carnivore diet and all this. Collagen protein, is there a benefit to it? If you get enough protein overall, do you not need collagen? What's the deal with collagen? Because that's a big thing the supplement industry really tries to push on people, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not like a bad thing. I think the only bad thing about it is that it can be expensive. But essentially all it is a collection of amino acids, right? Now, if I were to ever have someone that says, "Okay, I take this," I would say don't count that as a part of your total protein intake because it does not have all essential amino acids.
Okay.
With that said, it's not to say it's not useless. I mean, if you're taking it because you want to improve your hair, it might, but what your body's going to do is take the amino acids and put it where it sees fit in that
Okay.
moment, right? Where the need is. So it's difficult to say, you're targeting it for XYZ. It's not harmful. We don't really know how helpful it is. There's been some research to show that it might help with like type of tissue or maybe post-surgical things,
Oh,
but I
that
think the
makes sense.
research is pretty limited. In a situation where you're like after an injury and you have a surgery, your needs are higher, having collagen could help just simply because of that.
Okay. And actually that's
Yeah.
something I'd never even you just said something I'd never even thought about with collagen is to like and I think a lot of people do this. In fact, I know I've heard people talk about they've included like if they have a 200-gram protein goal and they get 20, 30 grams of collagen, they're counting that towards it, but it's essentially
Hmm.
protein is what you're saying. So it really
Right.
isn't going to do what they think
Right.
it's doing. So
Yeah, exactly.
awesome. That's actually a really good point. I didn't really think about. All right. So let's talk about, I think one of your biggest passions is gut health, right? And it's also, I think, super important and really misunderstood. So I guess what foods help with gut health? Like if and
Hmm.
then on after that, like, are there any that do hurt gut health?
We definitely have a lot more data about what can help. We're still figuring out why it helps, although we have some pretty good information. But generally speaking, if I had to rank the top food or type of food that helps with gut health, it's going to be plant foods. Now, that's not like plant foods in the absence of animal, it's just plant foods, right? So, nuts, fruit, vegetables, seeds, legumes, whole grains, leafy greens. They all provide, fiber,
Hmm.
which is super helpful for gut health. There's two types of fiber that typically come in, one food. Typically, there's like different ratios of both of these, but it would be soluble and insoluble. The insoluble is the sort of fiber that we don't fully digest, provides, and I'm just going to be blunt about this because this is part of my job, but it provides bulk to the stool. It helps
Yeah.
you pass your stool. And not everyone likes to talk about poop. I don't mind.
Oh yeah.
But
Everyone does it, right? Like,
everyone does it. Yep. So that kind of helps provide that sort of bulk. And there can be too much, especially if we're not hydrating, right? So that can create issues. But that's like one type of fiber. And then we've got the soluble, which dissolves in water and it kind of can be gelatinous. And the best example that I like to give is, like chia seeds. They absorb water, they kind of expand. So they have some soluble fiber in them. What's so special about soluble fiber is that it feeds the gut bacteria that live within us. So I always like to like kind of to put it like this, like it's good to remember we're feeding ourselves, but we're not just feeding ourselves. We've got this community of gut microbes in our large intestine primarily that do a lot for us. And so by consuming plant foods, we're consuming fiber, helps keep the stool going, but it also feeds these microbes. And that's what we want. We want them to flourish. We don't want them to starve because that can create some issues where they migrate where they shouldn't, where they start essentially feasting on our intestinal wall. We don't want that. So we want to give them the food that they need, which is going to be fiber. And I also like to say too, big research study, it's discussed in this really awesome documentary I recommend to almost all of my patients, which is Hack Your Health: The Secrets of Your Gut. It's on Netflix. They describe this whole thing way better than I can here in this Q&A, but it's fantastic. And so they talk about this research and they discovered that they were like, okay, let's land on a number of plants to eat per week or whatever, or at some period of time that will lead to more positive health outcomes and, bacteria diversity. And it was about 30 different plants per week. Sounds like a lot, but it's totally doable when you consider all of the options you have to choose from.
Kind of talking
That's
of,
my answer
yeah,
for,
so that kind of leads, so we've all heard this, I think, since we were kids, right? Is like the whole eat the rainbow thing, right? Of like the
yeah.
variety of different things. And
Hmm.
that research and hold out like basically proves that.
Yeah.
So
This whole like, parents saying eat your vegetables, grandma saying eat your vegetables, like
yeah.
there's some truth to it. So many cultures even implement that kind of thing, right? I mean, that would be my answer for what helps it. Aside from the fiber too, we get the vitamins and minerals and the micronutrients. That's a big like source of those types of things too. So
And so kind of on that, like is and I we kind of talked about it a little bit with the carnivore thing about maybe affecting gut health one way or the other. Intermittent fasting is another sort of big thing, right? That you hear a lot of, a little bit less now. I feel like carnivore started taking over, but people so do cite like gut health improvement and stuff like that with intermittent fasting. Is there evidence to support that? Is it true, or is it just like if it works, go for it?
yeah, it could. I mean, in relation to gut health, it really just depends on like what the person might have been doing prior to implementing, intermittent fasting. Because essentially what you're doing from a gut health or like digestive perspective is if you are shortening your feeding window and spending longer time between meals, you're giving yourself some bowel rest, right? So if you're only eating 6 hours out of the entire 24 hours, the rest of that time, you're giving yourself bowel rest. You're allowing your digestion to do its thing. And maybe for that person, bowel rest is helpful because they were eating just a lot throughout the day and maybe overloading their system. So that's like one thing I can think of just from like a clinical perspective, like why it could be helpful for gut health. But on the other hand, if someone, is maybe didn't have that sort of issue where they were overloading the system and experiencing things like constipation or whatever. They might experience constipation if they do this because you have this long gap in between meals. And as we know, the GI transit is happening 24/7. And if we're spending a long time in between meals, we might spend a long time in between bowel movements.
Right.
So it's like, it just depends
That makes sense.
from a gut health perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And then really, I mean, other than that, like intermittent fasting, essentially, my understanding, there's really nothing super magical about it. It's just a way to put yourself in a calorie deficit, which is why so many people with weight loss on it, right? Like you've eliminated
Yeah.
a third of your eating window for the day, right? And
Exactly. It can be helpful from that perspective, but then it could be for some people harmful because maybe they don't do well with long periods in between meals, like women in particular. Yeah,
get
and yeah,
angry.
and
Yeah.
some men like yeah, and so it might create a situation where you're like overeating. And so even if you're shortening your window, you're over consuming your calories.
Yeah.
So it depends on your behaviors and just how your individual biology is too, and your schedule.
Right. Yeah. Work and kids, all that stuff. Right. So with gut health, kind of staying on that, what's one thing that like someone like today is like could probably do to improve their gut health, like right now, like something that they could like after watching this, whatever, reel, YouTube, wherever this ends up, I'm going to do that and probably see an immediate improvement.
Yeah, well, so I talked about plant foods, right? And the biggest mistake that I see people make is like, all right, I'm going all in. We're doing this. I'm gonna eat as many plants. And then they end up feeling kind of worse off. And that's actually normal. But sometimes it turns people off. They're like, oh, this is not for me. Like, I don't react very well to all this fiber. It's a normal response if you're overloading your system with new things. Not only is your body, reacting to this difference in what you're eating, but also your gut microbes. It's gonna make them be very overactive. We're gonna have lots of fermentation and things going on. You're going to get bloated and have some gas, maybe some constipation, for some people, diarrhea. And so that's not necessarily a signal that it's not for you. It's just that the pace of consumption is not for you. We need to scale it back. And so I do help a lot of people. I have like a protocol to help people sort of gradually introduce things based on just their unique, system.
Okay.
But yeah, so I would say incorporate more of these things. Maybe if you're feeling spicy, incorporate some fermented foods because those
Oh,
have some benefits.
I love some kimchi, honestly. So
Yeah,
yeah,
same,
yeah.
same. So that can be helpful too. You know, for some individuals, so like a patient population that I work with, people might have histamine issues. I work with a population that has like connective tissue disorders. They have a higher risk of developing histamine sensitivity. And so for them, fermented foods might not be right because they're high in histamine. So that's something to watch out for some people. But otherwise, there's some great benefits to
Awesome.
those.
Supplements. Is there what supplements are worth it? What is not worth it, right? What's just kind of like a waste of money? Like, do you have like
Yeah.
top 3 to 5 and kind of give people some guidance there?
I'll start with the worth it. The worth it, I think creatine is a really great supplement. It's highly studied. In fact, I think they've recently shown that it's safe for like even teenagers. Not necessarily recommending to go out and do that if you're like 15 years old, but there's a lot of benefit to taking creatine. Performance wise, cognitively, even like in the elderly population. So creatine, absolutely worth it. Protein supplements, of course, if you need it, just to be careful where you're getting it from. One blanket statement I'll make is not every supplement is created equal. Sometimes we'll never know how much of a nutrient you're actually getting if they have proprietary blends. Be careful with that. Third party tested might be more expensive, but it's probably a better idea if we're doing supplements. Okay, creatine. I think a multi for people is okay. Just don't double up on the sources of nutrients you're getting. So if you're doing a multivitamin, be careful with also incorporating things like, let's say, AG1, which is kind of also a multivitamin.
Yeah.
That's one big thing that I see a lot is doubling up on nutrients. So just be careful with that. But I think a multivitamin for most people is okay. What else? Do you have any specific you're curious about?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
we get asked a lot about it. I have my own opinion on it, and we don't have the time to go into the craziness of some of the research I've seen on it. But BCAAs, do you
Yeah.
is it
I mean, I kind of put it in the same category as like collagen. Like it's fine, but you're gonna get it from food. You're gonna get it from your whey protein. Some people say it helps them with soreness and muscle recovery. Again, it's amino acids. So it's like if you want to take it, fine. It probably isn't gonna really wholly do what you want it to when compared to food or a protein supplement.
right? Yeah, that's kind of my whole thing. And then I've read a whole bunch of stuff on like central fatigue syndrome and all that, and like the leucine's role and all that, and like how BCAAs with like ultra marathoners and all that. But like 99.9% of people basically
Yeah.
feel like you're just kind of wasting your money. You could just buy
Yeah.
protein and eat protein.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So we got like less than a minute, so we'll just kind of wrap it up. So if somebody wants some more help or guidance, right? Obviously, they can go to the CERT website, but like, is there another way that they can reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty active there. It's at Thrive Performance Nutrition. That is my handle. And then I think there's a section on the Serve website to kind of get information about me. I have a website as well. It's thriveperformanceandnutrition.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm not sure when it's going to cut off here, but this was great, and
Yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah.
you're welcome. Thank you. It was
All
fun.
right.